this working? Yeah, it is.
Sorry. Yo!
Great. Cool, so I've been experimenting with a few things lately. One of those things is Docker, and so today I kind of want to share with you that experiment. But first, a little bit of context. Of course, it would stop working.
Did you turn it off?
There we go. So, I'm John. I really like cats. You'll notice that quite a bit for the slides. I work at News Corp, where we do quite a bit of Node. Been doing Node at News Corp for about maybe 3.5 years, I think. Lots of fun. So I work in an office where we've got lots of different groups of engineers that are playing around with Node, doing stuff with Node, whether it's build tools, building kind of static sites, even the sites that in our network themselves are powered by Node. And so I often have to go around to those individual teams and kind of help them out with various things. And what that means is I end up going from one project to the next, different sets of requirements in each individual project, different kind of dependencies to deal with, different types of versions of Node to deal with as well. And it makes it difficult to kind of support those teams. And so what I like to do is sort of figure out, well, in the same way that I refactor my code, how do I refactor kind of the processes that I use to sort of support the teams and so on. So in the first instance, I mean, what I generally do to address the issue around the version of Node in various projects that I work on is use NVM. Just to show of hands, anybody who actually uses NVM here? Okay, cool. It's actually interesting that there's talk of having NVM part of the Node Foundation. There's an issue going on at the moment around making a version manager standard as part of Node. So really interesting things going on around that space. And so most of the time, Node NVM allows me to get by. I can easily switch between different versions of Node depending upon the project that I'm working on. But it gets tedious. You can alleviate that by getting the devs to kind of put an NVMRC file in their projects to make it easier to just sort of work with a particular version of Node. And you can even script it so that whenever you're working on that project itself, it will automatically switch to that version of Node that you're using as well. Convenient, but doesn't necessarily solve the problem for me. So, a bit of a refresher. It's not a good idea to install a lot of the dependencies that you're working on with Node in a global space. You would have, hopefully you're not doing stuff like this. If you are, this presentation is absolutely no use for you. You might be doing stuff like this, where maybe you're installing Mocha globally. That's not so bad. Generally, a better way of doing that is keeping those sort of things local to your projects themselves. NPM is pretty good at understanding that you've got a dependency that is Mocha installed in your project, and it can quite happily sort of resolve that. Yeah, I'm using a pointer now. For those people over there, I mean, I can, maybe, I don't know.
It's more than cats.
So, yeah, you were, I don't know. So that's most, that's a better way of sort of dealing with some of those sort of global dependencies that should be local to a project. Now, there's other types of global things that you install, and that's command line tools. NPM has a lot of tooling on there that you can utilize to make things easier in your day-to-day. One of those tools that I use is NSP, which is the Node Security Project. And that allows me to sort of go into various different projects and just understand whether there's any sort of vulnerabilities in those packages themselves. I mean, we run it as part of our build pipelines, but not every project has kind of got that capability. So this is one of the tools that I utilize in sort of my day-to-day when I'm navigating from project to project, just to understand kind of what's going on in there. And you can do this with NVM as you're switching between different versions of Node, reinstalling some of those global packages that you've been using, NSP, anything really, but that becomes tedious. You basically have to do it each time. you'll install some command line tool and you're like, now I've switched the version of Node. You try and use it again and you're like, oh, it's not installed. I'll reinstall it. And that repetition is just frustrating. And we shouldn't have to do this for some of those packages that we use again and again. So there's got to be a better way. I like to keep my machine as clean as possible. I don't like kind of messing it up with unnecessary libraries and dependencies that I'm only using for a short period of time. So what I try and do is try and keep a clean room environment in my machine. It's a little bit anal, but it's, it makes me happy when I can have a nice clean machine and a desktop without any icons on it and all that kind of stuff. But I get really annoyed, like I said, I get really annoyed when I install something and it breaks everything. And I get frustrated. And equally, it's even more annoying when you're trying to help other team members out and they have the same sort of issue. And they're having problems with being able to use some module that you may have written, some tool that they're trying to use that you've built for them. So I like to automate things. I like to refine my processes, and so that's when I sort of started experimenting. And I'd heard about Docker quite a few times, and I've had a few false starts with it. I played around with it probably a year and a half ago, and the experience wasn't the best on Mac. I did a lot of research, and surprisingly, I found some interesting blog articles around using Docker and sort of using it to managing command line Ruby tools. A guy called Mike English, that was his blog post, and he himself, in terms of looking for how to manage his own sort of tooling, he found other people that are doing it. And so I figured, well, if it works for Ruby, well, why not Node? I mean, what would that look like? So I decided to experiment and play around. And fortunately, the experience now using Docker is much, much better. If you're on Yosemite, not so much. If you've got, it tends to have high CPU every now and again. You just got to reboot to fix that. So just to show hands, anybody who is using Docker has heard about Docker? Okay. Who doesn't know what Docker is? Cool. All right, that's good. I'm sure they'll be very pleased. Yeah. So Docker isn't just for the server, One of the things that I like to do before I invest myself in terms of learning something new is I dip my toe in it. I try to understand what it can provide me. We're actually thinking about using Docker on the server and telling it work, but I don't want to yet do that until I better appreciate the benefits that it can provide me. So I like to experiment, and that's kind of what I did. So just a slight refresher on Docker for those that may or may not be familiar. Docker is a little bit like the Git tree, where, and please, if I'm speaking incorrectly, somebody just call out. Like I said, I'm only sort of new to the Docker kind of thing. But essentially, if you're quite comfortable with Git, Docker has a similar sort of paradigm where you're incrementally kind of making changes to an underlying kind of code base of sorts. And that code base is essentially a virtualized kind of environment. And as part of that, that provides you with a lot of scope for doing really, really interesting things. So you could have multiple containers running on your machine for each individual project that you're working on. And that just encapsulates all the sort of dependencies that you may ever need for that particular project. So it becomes easier as you navigate from one project to the next in terms of managing that. That's something to really strive for, is that sort of implicit isolation of kind of the projects that you're working on. It makes it so much easier to manage. So what did I want to use Docker for? So I figured, well, really like that blog article. What can I use it for? So I decided, well, there's all these tools that I actually use. So let's see what I can do. Let's put them in a container and see what happens. So that's what I did. And what that allows you to do is there's always going to be sort of tooling that's not particular to a specific type of project that you're working on. There's those sort of tools that just do simple checks. They're just reading the file system. They're interrogating some of the metadata that's available in those files. can use to scaffold projects, even for doing deployments as well. Standardizing kind of a deployment tool that's really easy to manage and utilized by teams. But I think the real sort of benefit of this sort of stuff is that it makes onboarding new team members really, really easy. So imagine in your organization you have sort of this utility library of command line tools that is actively maintained, and so when somebody new starts, they literally just install Docker and then just effectively install or pull the image for your tooling. Essentially makes it so much simpler, and you can go potentially committing on day one if need be. So that's really powerful and really kind of helps with the engagement of the engineers when they realize, well, I can literally get started and get my hands dirty. So what does a Docker file look like? So Docker is sort of, you use a Docker file to describe essentially how you want to include the various dependencies that you need. So what we have here is this is just a really basic example. What I'm doing is I'm installing the Node security project. I'm installing Node versions to identify versions of Node. And I'm even installing that tool that Facebook recently released, which is the Create React app as well. And also, what I'm able to do is also bundle a localized project. So that localized project that I have here, and you'll see in the example later, is basically the menu that allows me to understand what's going on. And something which is really cool about Docker is that layering model. So if you notice on line 20, what I'm doing there is I'm copying the package JSON file into the container. And what's cool about that is that itself will be a layer. And steps after that, where I'm effectively installing it, that again is another layer. So I'm allowed to freely make changes to the code of my project within that container and not have to wear the cost of rebuilding the entire container as a result of that. And that's quite powerful. And what that means is the moment I change my package JSON file, I rebuild the Docker image, and it will basically go through and basically recreate those layers as well. So if you're not making a lot of changes to your dependencies, your environment for editing and manipulating the code becomes very fast and efficient. So what does it look like to kind of run one of these containers? Now, this is very verbose in terms of how you can actually utilize it. Here I'm sort of specifying the container. I'm mounting a volume, which is my current working directory, where I basically want to interact with some files. And I'm saying that I want to use the NodeNinja's toolbox, and I want to run the npm check tool. npm check checks for outdated dependencies in your project. Really, really cool tool, and it also helps upgrading them as well. But there's got to be a better way of doing that, and so what if it could be like this? Nice, simple, immediately available tool that you have on your machine or that any of your engineers can actually utilize. So let's do a demo. Let's see. Right. Okay. As I figure out the windows. All right.
That's your first problem. You're on a Mac.
It might be easier if I actually. I thought I was. If I just turn around here, I can sit better. All right. Let's see. Of course, it'd be in the wrong window. All right, let's. Hello. Okay. So, there's going to be an example Git repo as well, so you can go off and play around with this yourself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, hopefully this will work. I'm just going to rebuild this container. Nope, of course, it wouldn't work. Okay. Oh. Hold on. All right, let's try this one more time. Docker can be a bit funny. All right, just repeating Docker. All right, let's give this another go. All right. All right, cool. That's working. So, yeah, I've been playing around with it. So that's going through, and it's basically creating all those layers, essentially. Those layers basically are those changes that are described in the Docker file. Hopefully this will finish. Just out of interest, what is everybody using Docker for? If somebody wants to just shout out, anybody?
CI.
For everything.
Yeah, cool.
Package every single thing.
Similar to you.
Cool.
Not for all the things.
Your replacement.
It's actually a really good idea to keep your software separated. So if you have any sort of service, just keep every single piece of software in a separate Docker container. And since you can use something like a client Docker, which I don't know, it's like 20 megabytes.
20 megs, yeah.
Like really small. So you can have a completely empty environment for every piece of software. You have any database, anything that you use. And then combine, I don't know, 10, 15 different machines together.
Yeah, it's really powerful. So it's just gone through and it's installed, and it should be done. Cool. All right, let's give this another go then. I'll jump back around here. Okay, so I was playing around with this while everybody was having pizza, so hopefully it hasn't broken. So, okay, so let's have a look. Cool. All right. So that sample sort of project, what I've done is I've just bundled in a simple help menu to basically detail what's going on. And you can get a bit more creative with that. I like to use rainbows. But it's really sort of great to be able to sort of containerize a workflow, tooling, and have it available to other members of your team. And sort of gone are those days where it kind of works on my machine, but it doesn't work on your machine. It kind of makes it easier to support a large group of engineers. So let me just turn this back around. So let's play around and let's see what we can do. So let me move to a project that I'm working on at the moment. TCOG, yeah. And, oh, shit.
We love TCOGs.
Can everybody still hear me? Yeah, cool. All right, so let's see if I've got any vulnerabilities.
Hope not.
Cool. Well, I do have some vulnerabilities, but I knew about them, so I'm not surprised. And this is an example of the sort of tool that you don't really need to worry about the version of Node that it's running. You don't really need to be concerned about how it's kind of packaged. You know, it's universal to any project that you work on. At the end of the day, all it's really interrogating is the package JSON file and sort of figuring out what's going on there. So it's really, really cool. Let's do another one. So I bundled in the React scaffolding app. So let's have a look at that. So let me create a new directory.
Can I just ask, whose machine are you on now? Are you on yours or are you on the Docker image?
So when I'm running the command line tool, I'm on the Docker image.
Okay.
And what I've done is I've mounted the current working directory as a volume.
Yeah.
And so it's operating within the confines of that.
Okay.
So ninjas. Okay. CD ninjas. Okay, so let's give this a go. Create React.
C instead of S.
Respelled,
Yeah.
Close.
Okay, so let's give it a name. Foo. That works. There are some caveats with this. So at the moment, it's running npm via the container. So each time the container runs, it's basically standing up a fresh container. Now there's ways around that where you can basically store your npm cache elsewhere. Again, maybe having it as a mounted volume that you have on your machine. But each time, effectively, you run the container, it's basically starting fresh each time. The example project's there if you want to have a play around with it and tailor it to your need, by all means.
While we're waiting, what's the project name?
I just created it for today. It was just called NodeNinja's Toolbox. So there's a slide at the end which has got the URL. So I've kind of just pulled it out of something I've worked on and just kind of provided a simple example, hopefully as possible I could. NPM needs lift music, you know, like.
Yes.
Yeah, I think somebody's built I think it's an NPM GIF tool, so it plays like a random GIF when you're installing it.
You should install Hyperterm and then enable the thing that makes it look like it's chiseling stone as it goes across.
Well, anyway, I guess you get the idea. That's kind of going off and installing. Is it going to finish? Oh, it's saying it's finalizing. Apparently NPM's faster now.
It's like a Java finalizer. It eventually happens.
Okay, here we go. Oh no, now it's installing it should be okay, because some of the packages will be cached within that. Almost done. Come on. But what's cool about this is you could start off with a machine that doesn't even have Node.js installed on whatsoever. Just check out the project, run the make file, and you've got an environment that already has Node in it. You know, going back to that clean room environment. If you're like me, then happy days kind of thing. Let me now do npm start. Npm start. Oh, okay.
Did you CD to full?
Yeah, CD foo.
Hey.
Thank you. Cool. So that current directory is effectively mounted through the container, and the code, the tooling is effectively interacting with that code and allowing it to run. So hopefully, if we go to my browser. Oh, there's the mouse. No, there we go. Where did I open the window on my other screen? Of course it would. All right, let me just local host. All right, there we go. There we go. So there is the React starter project running from being controlled through the container and basically allowing that application that was being scaffolded to run. So that scaffolding tool could be something that you write yourself for your own projects that you're working on, that each of your engineers on your team could basically utilize. Cool. So I think I've got one more slide. Let's have a look. Where we go. Apparently it's there. Maybe next time I'll bring a separate machine for the demo.
I think you need to flick your window.
Yeah. There we go.
You go to mission control. And then.
There we go.
It's on your, it's on your screen.
Sorry, everybody.
Why don't you just close that window while I take you back to the other one?
Possibly. Let's give it a try.
We've got nothing to lose right now.
No, we don't. And there was me worrying about I'd have a too-short a presentation.
Is this the in slide? It's got a cat on it.
Yeah, it does have a cat on it. But not the cat you're looking for. I think I've actually closed all my windows. All right, sorry.
That's my bad.
Man, shift T.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, you can go back here.
There we go.
Back button.
Back button.
Random key.
Just write the URL on the screen.
Sorry, everybody.
Click your history.
That's a good idea, actually.
Do
History.
NodeNinja just at the top. Recent things.
Ah.
This is my talk. Oh, I featured.
Cool. Just to play it safe, I won't press full screen just in case it just, you know. Okay, cool. So, so I showed you a really basic example. What have I been using it for? So we use Akamai, the CDN provider at News, and they provide a tool which is a way of testing their ESI code. And it's not the greatest of tools. So I basically use Docker to containerize it and write my own little sort of command line app for it and build a code playground so that people could go in there and play around with ESI code and run that. The ESI server requires Apache, so I didn't want everybody to install Apache. So effectively, I have this container running Apache with a Node server providing the playground, and also a Node app providing the command line tooling. And we also have an AWS deployment tool for managing servers and stuff like that we sort of packaged as part of that as well. And if you're interested in sort of having a look at the project, playing around with it, just pulling it down and looking at it, then that's where you can find it.